Futuristic literature can take on countless shapes and forms. It experiments with images, narratives, and ideas that are often still remote to the human experience. It makes the storyteller a figure arriving from the far away, a half-prophet, half-deceiver, who unravels tales that reach into some elsewhere or beyond. This is what makes futuristic literature a dangerous wager, for it could be pure fantasy, or it could be a secret vision towards some impending moment in which our very survival hangs in the balance. Thus, we never know whether to trust the futuristic author's intentions and projections, for it is likely that they amount to nothing more than speculative entertainment, but it's also just as likely that they are quick glimpses into the critical event of our aftermath, something between a lie and a destiny. There have always been futuristic literatures. The ancient soothsayers and fortune-tellers of the earliest civilizations would read signs in the stars and speak ominously about ages of coming war, famine, or natural catastrophe. They also wrote books of the dead, which attempted to explain the journeys that we would undertake in an unknown afterlife. Thousands of years later, modern utopian writers, like the Russian cosmists, would enchant us with dreams of human perfection, conquest of the planets, the merging of technology and the mind, and the attainment of immortality. Then there were the great avant-garde movements of the last century, surrealism, minimalism, futurism, who all took some stake in foretelling a visionary future. Like the group Oulipo, whose very name meant Workshop of Potential Literature, and whose primary aim was to invent unforeseen methods and techniques of expression, what some called the story-making machine, that used everything from tarot cards to chessboard movements to mathematical equations to determine how their plots would advance. Nevertheless, what unites all of these attempts at futuristic literature is the concept of distortion, with distortion meaning a radical change or subtle twist in the order of things, and particularly how this concept plays out across the three axes of space, time, and reality itself. Futuristic literatures often bend and expand space in unique ways. They take us into the no man's land where our sense of place feels disorienting and unfamiliar, as the borders disappear and the edges blur. We become increasingly bewildered with each step we take, forgetting why we even came here and where we were ever going, as if enveloped in some enigmatic fog or mist. As such, let us look at the following quote from our first example of futuristic literature, the Japanese writer Haruki Murakami's 2004 novel titled After Dark. Here he writes, "Everything, finally, unfolded in a place resembling a deep, inaccessible fissure. Such places open secret entries into darkness in the interval between midnight and the time the sky grows light. None of our principles has any effect there. No one can predict when or where such abysses will swallow people, or when or where they will spit them out." Indeed, the book After Dark suspends us in an aerial camera view of the futuristic capital of Tokyo, where the city itself plays the main character, guiding us through a fractal plot of barely intersecting events and figures between the hours of 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. Scattered throughout this textual universe of urban contours and nocturnal meetings are short interludes that take us into the heart of a lone bedchamber. It is something like a bare hotel room located somewhere in the badlands of the metropolis. The lights have been turned off, and a young woman rests in a deep, unnatural sleep upon a mattress. Her slumber is the work of some unseen, diabolical force. Across from her motionless body is a flickering television with the live video feed of yet another empty room, and at its center sits a coldly masked man on a chair. He is watching her intensely and pulling her gradually through the screen to the other side of the virtual. Thus we are confronted with a disturbing tension, that we must bear omniscient witness to this futuristic night as the site of abduction, and yet we are not allowed to interfere. We are stranded in a space of futility and in-betweenness, something like purgatory. The first distorting space we enter is the city of Tokyo itself. It is the ultimate diversion. Its grand spectacle of noise, artificial light, and consumptive excess are all just distractive particles meant to conceal the mutation happening back in that one room. That room where a resting sacrifice finds herself pulled into eventual absorption. Before dawn, she will become permanently trapped in the blank static of the simulated. She will lose herself to the evening of the mechanism, the design, and the faceless intelligence that wants our human throne. Thus, the After Dark streets teach us another crucial paradox about this futuristic concept of space. That sometimes the most impersonal spheres are required, something like a modern cityscape, in order to execute the most personal violence, which is to thieve our very existence from ourselves. The second distorting space that we enter is the bedroom. It is a workshop of technological sorcery, a minor island amidst the infinity of crisscrossing districts, alleys, and all-night clubs beyond its four white walls. This bedroom is also where we readers are converted into insomniac voyeurs, while she remains hostage to absolute sleep. We cannot speak to her, nor influence the procession of events, but rather must observe at close distance this reversal system, where living creations move backwards, from emergence to vanishing. Finally, the third distorting space that we enter is the screen. It is the separating curtain that functions both as barrier and portal between the so-called real and those zones of reproduction and immortal circulation through which once palpable beings become floating images. The screen thereby serves us a new riddle about the inside and the outside. For the more we insulate ourselves, the more we actually abandon the world, sinking into pale abstraction. Just like those many fairy tales tried to instruct us long ago, where children would immerse themselves in a small forest, closet, well, or rabbit hole, only to have their souls stolen. Futuristic literatures also show an amazing willingness to shatter the hourglasses of time. Linear time and clock time are either fluidly elongated, burst open, or compressed into instantaneous crystals that disrespect the separation of past and present, before and after, now and then. Instead, we are faced only with multiple hypothetical futures, like a minefield or whirlpool of suspicious paths of time that could transport us into the always or into the never was. Our second example of futuristic literature is by the Iraqi short story writer Hassan Blasim, whose work titled The Hole recounts the mysterious phenomenon of a deep well beneath the earth, where certain people sometimes fall and remain for millennia. He writes, "Everyone who visits the hole soon learns how to find out about events of the past, the present, and the future. And the inventors of the game had based it on a series of experiments they had conducted to understand coincidence. There were rumors that they couldn't control the game, which rolls ceaselessly on and on through the curves of time." We ourselves begin the story of the Hole when a thief from our own modern world is being chased by masked gunmen in a war-torn country. He finds himself stumbling into an underground pit where he discovers a bare-chested, grizzled old man sitting next to the dead body of a foreign soldier. The old man asks this newly fallen stranger cryptic questions, like whether he believes in God. The old man offers cryptic advice, telling him that he should pray for colorful animals. He makes cryptic predictions, saying that the stranger will one day eat the old man's body, and that another fallen person will eat him, or use his energy to fuel their futuristic battery systems. The old man tells cryptic origin stories, explaining that he himself was once an inventor from the time of a medieval kingdom, and that he was attacked by thieves for bringing lanterns to the city at night. The old man tells cryptic transformation stories, claiming that he has since become a genie and a phantom. And the old man explains cryptic details about the nature of the whole itself, revealing that its creators were studying the phenomenon of coincidence before they lost control. Moreover, the old man lights endless candles while rambling about musical event chains and claiming that he already knows everything about whoever becomes captives of the vortex in which they find themselves. He tells the stranger all the details of his beginnings and endings with an air of mixed indifference, amusement, and impatience, all the while reading aloud from a book of hallucinations with his favorite line repeated: "We are merely exotic shadows in this world." Eventually the old man dies, and the thief is left alone for what feels like hundreds of years, his eyes open but his mind asleep, until a wounded young woman falls into the hole with multiple futuristic devices attached to her skin. Breathless, she asks the now ancient narrator who he is, and he responds, "I am a genie," like the old man before him, while slowly seating himself in the old man's corner. In literature, we often call these kinds of temporal distortions a metalepsis, which means when a character slips between logically exclusive worlds. We are therefore crossing within impossible times, which produces a puzzling effect of intrusion into the counterfactual and the ghostly. However, here in the futuristic story of the whole, it is less a question of sliding levels than of constant possessions, as characters plunge continually amidst the whomever, whenever, and however. The old man is in fact not a specter from some bygone era. Instead, he is a volcanic mouth that feasts on all moments and events in order to continue forever. He is the quicksand of all conceivable instances. He is the innkeeper who becomes inseparable from his guests, like those snake pits or wolves' dens where all creatures sleep on top of one another, forming ominously undifferentiated shapes and curvatures. We no longer know where our face ends and his begins. We must remember, after all, that the futuristic creators of the whole were supposedly attempting to trace the nature of coincidence, and that to coincide is just another way of saying to share the inside of something. For this to occur, a great distortion must envelop our very understanding of time, for we are no longer in the diagram of a straight line, but rather in a labyrinth, where all of us are simultaneously swallowed, simultaneously knotted together, and simultaneously trading our identities, experiences, and desires. Our third and final concept of futuristic literature revolves around the distortion of reality itself. For the longest time, there has been a classical division between the reader, who sits in a presumably legitimate reality, and the unreal text in their hands, which alludes to a world of figments. But what if literature's theater of operation suddenly lost this boundary? What if we were no longer safe believing ourselves to be located within an authentic realm, but instead began to question whether the act of reading a story gradually transformed us into a mere story as well, to fall beneath the spell and touch of the pretender? Thus, our third example to showcase this reality distortion does not take place in an actual book, but rather within the architectural universe where books of the future reside. This wrests us into the heart of the library or the bookstore, which arose in ancient times as a site where both mystics and scholars gathered amidst never-ending shelves and galleries of knowledge. Over the past decades, however, there have been striking developments in the reimagining of these institutions. Some have become like illuminated towers, while others have been built to resemble liquid foam, and still others have morphed into halls of mirrors, and all with one clear intent: to bring readers themselves into the arena of madness, illusion, and mirage. With that said, let us take this principle of reality distortion to its extreme by considering a newly opened futuristic bookstore in Chengdu, China. With an overall collection of over 80,000 books, the texts spiral and collide from all directions, sweeping from the black glass floors to the high mirrored ceilings, which give one the impression of spinning in a cosmos of pages. With its soaring columns and smooth geometric angles, we find ourselves in awe before an immensity of unreal architectural forms come to life. Thus, the volumes on the walls are no longer the only hidden sectors of wonder. Instead, the surrounding atmosphere of the bookstore in which we dwell is the gateway into entrancement, and we ourselves have become characters in its storybook landscape. But then again, like all compelling narratives, there are some tricks buried in this architecture of fascination. The first is that most of the visible books are not actually there. They are not real books. Rather, they are hollow appearances of texts, decorative accessories placed strategically to simulate the excessive scale of astonishment. And so it is that we become like infants who prefer the colorful pictures to the written text, wandering through a maze of balconies and arcades that house nothing more than facades. And the second intriguing aspect is that many of the books are also digitally recorded, which suggests that the once solid and tangible covers have already flown from our grasp into an archive of immaterial and inkless chambers. And this leaves us in a grave state, for it means that these many books representing our emblems, symbols, and poetry will keep on transmitting their meanings long after the human race itself has faded from existence, as if to say that futuristic literature is something that outlasts our own reality, flinging our words into oblivion forever, even when there is no one left to hear them.